Hello, my name is Ian Green. I'm the Executive Chef at the Highland Imperial Hotel. Today I'm going to show you how to do a salted caramel and chocolate tart with clotted cream and some strawberries. We're going to show you how to make a sweet pastry. We can line a tartlet case. You can also buy the tartlet cases, which can be easier at the moment. So I'll show you both sides. First of all, we're going to make the caramel. So what you need for this is a tin of condensed milk. You don't open it, you don't pierce it, you leave it whole. Just drop that in to some cold water. The water needs to cover the top of the tin, and we're going to bring this to the boil on the stove and turn it down to just short of a boil, and you're going to cook that for about 3 hours, just constantly making sure that the top of the tin is covered. That is really, really important. So it needs to be a deep pan, make sure there's enough water, and keep the top of the tin covered at all times so it doesn't basically explode. So we're going to put that onto the stove. Okay, after 3 hours, take the can out of the water very carefully and allow it to cool right down. When you open it, you'll get basically a caramel toffee. So really important you don't do it when it's too hot. For obvious reasons, you'll end up scalding yourself, but that is caramel toffee. So we can keep that to one side. Try and keep it at room temperature. It'll be easier to use when you go to put it inside your tart. Next, we're going to make the pastry. Okay, to make the sweet pastry, 3 simple ingredients. We've got the flour, butter, which if you get it to room temperature will be a lot easier to mix into the flour, and icing sugar. You can mix all this by hand. If you do, take the butter, dice it up even smaller, it'll be easier to mix. You can do it in a food processor or in a mixing machine, which is how we're going to do it. So flour into the bowl with the butter and the icing sugar, which I've previously sifted, and we're going to add this to the mixing machine. Okay, on a medium speed, we're going to start beating the butter into the flour and the icing sugar until it almost starts to look like a crumble topping kind of consistency. Okay, when the butter's mixed into the flour and the icing sugar, you should end up with something that resembles like a crumble topping. And then you just add a couple of splashes of cold water. Again, you can always add, but you can't take away. Leave that to mix in before you add any more, and just see how that brings it together as a dough, and it should form together to be a nice dough. Okay, when the dough has come out, it should be relatively sticky, but not wet. It shouldn't be wet to the touch, so it should be sticky enough that we can roll that and move it. So we're just going to dust it very slightly with a touch of flour to stop it from sticking, and then I'm going to wrap it in some cling film and place it in the fridge to rest for about half an hour, 20 minutes to half an hour, just to allow the pastry to rest before we use it. Now the pastry's had a chance to rest in the fridge, take it out and allow it to come up to room temperature. You don't want it warm, otherwise the fats in the butter will make it quite sticky to work with. But we're going to take that out onto a floured workbench on the kitchen side. Lightly flour the base and the pastry. Again, you can always add, but you can't take away. The more flour you add, you're altering the recipe of the pastry, so don't add too much all at once. Touch on your rolling pin, and then just going to roll this out. Again, depends how confident you are with pastry work as to how thin you're going to be able to roll this. For the purposes of this video, don't actually have a small enough ring at home to work, so I have a slightly large ring here, but I'll show you the process of how to line it. But then when we actually make the tart, I'll make it in a brought tartlet case to show you kind of how we're doing so it equates to the right size. So once your pastry is rolled out, it should be able to come away from the work surface. If you lightly flour your rolling pin, carefully hook the first bit of pastry up onto the rolling pin and roll it back towards you. That's going to give you your pastry. You can then place your ring right way up and then unravel your pastry. It just saves you picking it up with your hands, that way you have more chance of tearing it. With your thumb and your index finger, you're gently just going to press the pastry into the ring. Loosen out any parts that may overlap. And then cut off any excess pastry you have. Do not cut right to the top, because once this is cooked you can just trim around the edges on an angle away from the tartlet case and you'll be left with a perfectly round ring. Okay, next to make the chocolate ganache. Chocolate, if you can get it into these aren't Cadbury's buttons, these are how we buy them, but if you can get them into something of that kind of size or smaller, if you have a block of chocolate, chop it up until it's small, it will melt. What we're going to do is we're going to add the cream and the sugar to a pan, and we're going to bring it just short of the boil. What we don't want to be doing is adding boiling hot sugar to the chocolate, because just straight away it will split the chocolate. So we're going to bring this to just short of the boil. Okay, I'm going to stir it just to make sure that the sugar starts to dissolve. You can use dark chocolate. For this purpose I've used milk chocolate. It won't work with white chocolate. It'll be a different recipe, unfortunately. You can feel now with the spoon that there's no sugar granules in the bottom. So just as it starts to boil around the outside of the pan, not in the middle, that's the time to kind of take it off the heat. Once the cream has come just short of the boil, you're going to carefully, slowly add it to your chocolate. A little bit at first, just to help mix in. A, it will stop it from splashing, but B, it won't be too hot of temperature initially for the chocolate. So again, it will just avoid it from splitting. At this point, you're probably going to think it's not going to mix in, but it will as that chocolate starts to melt. You can see it's starting to melt now. I'm going to add the rest. And then we're going to keep this warm, ready to glaze our tart. Last touch of cream to go in now. And what you should end up is with a nice smooth chocolate. This is a ganache with a nice glaze on the top. It's quite shiny. When that sets on top of your caramel inside the tart, it should stay quite shiny. Okay, so there's the ganache. Okay, now to assemble the tart, again as I said earlier, the tartlet ring that I've got here is too big, so this is a brought tartlet case, but this is the kind of size you want, unless you particularly like chocolate, you might want it that big. Take your tartlet case and then a good spoonful or two of the condensed milk, toffee. Again, room temperature, not fridge, it would be too hard. And then a couple of spoonfuls of the sea salt. Now, it needs to be sea salt flakes really. Cooking salt has got a totally different flavour to it. We give that a little mix in. Again, now this is totally dependent on your taste. But you want enough of a contrast so that you know it's salted caramel. Unfortunately, someone has to do it. You can give it a quick try. Just a touch more salt. And then we're going to simply spoon that into your tartlet case. About 3/4 of the way from the top. And then with the ganache, just give it another little stir and just gently drizzle over the top. And I've made this before with somebody, they said it looks like I'm making a Rolo. But literally that is your tart with a nice shiny glaze on the top. What we can do with that is set that in the fridge. The chocolate will start to firm up, so we'll pop that in the fridge for now. About 5 to 10 minutes to solidify. Okay, so to plate the dish, I'm going to take the chocolate tart out of the fridge, take it out a good 15-20 minutes up to half an hour maybe before you want to eat it. Probably just before you start your starters, you'll just give it a chance to warm up. Now, optional if you want to, you can just sprinkle a little bit of salt on top. And then the clotted cream, if you take a hot tablespoon and empty your clotted cream into a bowl, and then with the hot tablespoon, gently keep turning it over by bringing it towards you. Just so you can get a nice rounded shape of clotted cream. And then you can garnish just with a few strawberries. If you can't get strawberries, maybe some raspberries or something like that around the plate. Very simple but very tasty salted caramel and chocolate tart with clotted cream and strawberries.